أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my brothers and sisters in Islam. Inshallah, we're going to continue now looking at pre-Islamic Arabia in the latter years of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life, before the Bi'tha period, i.e. before he was given the role of Nubuwah, of prophethood. And we're going to look at the daily life in Mecca, in fact. Now, one of the interesting facts was that the Quraysh themselves, they had a sense of justice. They had a sense that because the economy was actually driven, the fact that their wealth and their livelihoods were financed by the pilgrimage, because as people would come to do pilgrimage to the Kaaba, they would bring goods and return goods. So it was kind of like an import-export business. And as this business continued, there was sometimes an increase in crime as a result of it. And what had happened is, in the early life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is something that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew about, that there was a man who came to trade during this pilgrimage period, and he had his goods taken away from him from some of the stronger tribes within Mecca. And when this happened, he stood up in front of everybody and he said, who is going to allow such a thing to happen? That someone comes as a visitor and that, you know, I have had my goods and my belongings taken away. And this didn't fall on deaf ears. You know, the Quraysh themselves, they felt ashamed. It was customary for them to be good hosts and to, you know, to deal with the people that visit them in some kind of kindness that they had. You know, and this is yet again a kind of a disparate nature within the Quraysh, that in some ways they would be really awful in the way that they treat each other. They would be treating their daughters, you know, they would kill their daughters, they would disrespect women, they would disrespect each other. They used to have a custom, that a saying that, you know, my tribe, right or wrong, i.e. if my son has committed an offense, if I'm a stronger tribe, then I will back him even if he's in the wrong. So they had these injustices and these iniquities, and yet when they saw this, they felt that this is something that, you know, makes them look bad. So the Quraysh, many of the leading members of the Quraysh, they met in the house of Abdullah bin Jidan, and what they did is they discussed how they should form an alliance and have a situation where all of the tribes within the Quraysh, the powerful tribes, would account each other, so that if anyone were to attack a visitor, someone who would come for business during the pilgrimage period, or anyone would oppress that person, then all of the tribes would take responsibility in taking care of their own members of their tribe who had really, they were protecting their interests, because obviously this affected the trade of all of the tribes within the Quraysh, and this is why this pact was done. And so there was some sense of fairness in that as well, and that this is why this was called the Hilf al-Fudul, and this was the pact that they made, that they would protect someone. So this is one of the things that happened in the Prophet ﷺ's life, and later on he said that if this kind of agreement were to come up again, that he would agree to such an agreement. So we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to enjoin on each other, or to work with other people, even if they're not Muslim, as long as it's within good things and in piety, and not in something that is oppressive or something that is out away from Islam. So the fact is that we can work with non-Muslims, we can work with our neighbors, we can work with, you know, generally people in our society, but it must meet the Islamic standard. It cannot contradict in any way. I cannot demonstrate with Muslims with the UN solutions, for example, for Iraq, because the UN solutions say that occupation is illegal, but that doesn't mean I agree and demonstrate with them when the solution is that America remain to rebuild Iraq in this example. So the fact is that when we have cooperating in piety and goodness, this has to be based on the ahkam sharia, it has to be based on the Islamic criteria, and not what we define as good or what we define as piety, but what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines it. And this is to show that if good and bad were defined by us, what we viewed as good, we could see many good aspects in the pre-Islamic Arabia, and we would think that probably there's nothing wrong with the society. For example, I want to throw in a few other points about the fact of respecting women. The fact is that people said, oh, they buried their daughters, but also they had respected women like Hind within their society. They had people like Khadija radiallahu an. So they obviously had people within the society with great amount of respect within the society that were women. So it's not always the case that this was where it was complete, everything was bad, so that, you know, this is why it needs Islam. Often this over exaggeration means that we don't understand correctly understand what the problem was in Mecca. The problem in Mecca was that the Quraysh did not have a true and clear sense of Allah. They believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many of the people, the Mushrikeen, the Nasara, the Yahud, the Hanafiya, all of them believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They all even used to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for rain and some other essential things. But they did make partners besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. So this shows that these people, they didn't have a clear understanding about their concept of God, because they did not arrive at belief through the correct process. Whereas we can see when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given revelation, he called to people to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a rational manner. He called them to look at the stars, look at the sky, look at the constellations, look at the sea, look at many things, to contemplate why these things have a certain order, why they have a certain precision, how they were defined and shaped in such a way. And this is not for men of understanding. Is this not a creator that put these things and molded these things and tweaked these things to this, in this way, for life to be possible? So the Prophet ﷺ carried this. So I'm showing you that they believed in Allah in some sense, but they also mixed ideas in as well. Like today we have some similarities in the sense that not as bad as being, you know, mushriks, but the fact is that we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sovereign, Allah is one. But at the same time as saying He is one, we then say, well, except maybe in terms of making laws, we need to have a democracy, and if Muslims vote for something that is not from Islam as a majority, then we have to accept it. Or we say Allah is al-Raziq, Allah is al-Raziq, so rizq min Allah, rizq, the provision is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yet they will say, well, in case if there's a durura, then we can take IMF loans, we can take US loans, and therefore it's allowed. So you can see that the inconsistencies take place like this when we don't understand have a clear concept of God. Now, on the subject of the women of Mecca, one of the notable things that happened in the Prophet ﷺ is when the Prophet ﷺ himself was proposed to, which is also shows maybe the role of this particular woman, Khadijatul Kubra, radiallahu anha, that she had someone propose to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the fact that women had some role, as well as awful way that the women were treated. They were treated in some way with some respect in the society as well. And the problem that Islam came to fix was this belief and the system which deals with the inconsistent way human beings make laws. In one way they give them respect, and another way they give them total and utter disrespect in regards to women. Now, the marriage to Khadija radiallahu anha was actually had a major impact on the personality and the growth of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And for that there is a lesson in it for us as well, that even in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his wife and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they sought each other on kindness, goodness, trustworthiness, reliability. They saw each other on character. And subhanAllah, even today, even though we have the Qur'an on our shelves, we have many mufassirin who have explained in depth what criteria we should use to get married. Yet again, we choose people with exotic looks, or we look at people for the wealth that they have, or we look for all sorts of things, but we don't ask how much Qur'an has she memorized. We don't ask how much Islam does she know. What kind of way does she want to raise the children? Does she want to raise the children in an Islamic school or with an Islamic education? Or does she want to teach them at home? We don't ask these questions. We look to only the superficial things. Moving on, looking at some of the beliefs of the people of the Quraysh, there were some practices that were strange when the Quraysh themselves had a strange connection or relationship in understanding the concept of God. Because as I've said, they used to swear by Allah, but yet there are many incidences that I can tell you that made them, that expressed how unclear view they had in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His attributes. Very quickly, there were three main things that that would stick out for anyone who studies Seerah. One is when the Kaaba once was flooded and destroyed. And the Quraysh decided to rebuild it. And two interesting things about that is that when they went to rebuild it, they bought wood that was with wealth that was not based on interest, even though they use interest in all other aspects of the trade. Secondly, the Quraysh, as they were rebuilding the Kaaba, they said, A'udhu Billah, but they said, Ya Allah, don't be afraid, all we want is good. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be afraid of His creation. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the attribute of not knowing what's going to happen. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unaware what's going to happen in the future, and that He has to fear the creation. So you can see that they believed in Allah, but it was inconsistent, just like the way that they had inconsistent beliefs in how to manage their society as well. Also, the way that they ascribed daughters to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet found it abhorrent to have daughters themselves. This is a strange thing to have inconsistency in. Also, as a last final example before we conclude, they used to make gods out of dates. And one famous example is Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, who used to do this. And he said that one day when I was traveling, I felt very hungry. I then just ate my god. And subhanAllah, today we have mobile, there's actually Hindu gods that you can download as an app. I mean, what kind of god is it, you know, on the iPhone that needs to be downloaded, that requires, you know, wireless, you know, connection to be downloaded? This is, people don't appreciate that this is an inconsistent, irrational understanding of the concept of God. I will inshallah continue in the next video, but just to point out some statistics of today to show us that this is the inequities and the problems that we face even in this society. Some of the statistics of the best example of Western freedom and democracy and capitalism is in America, and yet the statistics are that they have 20,000 murders a year, they have 30,000 suicides a year, they have 32,000 die every year of AIDS, and 100,000 rapes a year in America. Subhanallah, with these kind of statistics, some of the inconsistent things that took place within pre-Islamic Arabia, we can see that even though when human beings aim to do good, because it's based on their disparate thinking of defining what's good and bad, because one person's idea of good is another person's idea of bad. One person's idea of love is another person's idea of oppression. It could be, someone could say for the sake of love, they commit rape for the sake of love, they commit murder for the sake of love, they do many things. They euthanize their old parents for the sake of love. People say that they abort their children, i.e. love for themselves, or for love for them and their husband, that they would abort their child. There's many things people say they do for love. There's many people say things people do for the sake of what they consider to be good. People make sacrifices even, risk their lives for what they think is good. Many soldiers are going and risking their lives in Iraq. For what? For what they think is good. But at the same time, actually what they're doing is oppressing the Muslims in Iraq. They're entering a sovereign country and interfering with the affairs of the Muslims. They may think that they're doing good, but this is the problem with us when we try to define what is good and bad and not base it on the laws and the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us. And for this reason, how does this pre-Islamic Arabia compare to the situation we have in our world now? Even if human beings are trying to develop a system that they believe will work, ultimately it will, in the end, it will fail. And I'll give you some of the examples of the inconsistencies of a country which supposedly has good health, respects women, that they want to protect the lives of their citizens. America is supposedly the shining beacon of freedom, capitalism and democracy, and yet there are 20,000 murders a year. There are 18,000 people who die of AIDS. That's not the people who already have HIV. These are the 18,000 people who die of AIDS. In 2005 there were 191,000 rapes in America, which I believe 91% of those were women. Why is that not a coincidence? You see, whenever we leave man to create laws from his own mind, or if we look at any previous civilization when they moved away from the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the people who get it the toughest is women within the society. And this is why in Islam we give them honor and we give them a protection so that they don't get exploited, either by rape or by people have, at that time in pre-Islamic Arabia, they had brothels, or whether they have where women expose themselves for money. All of these things, if we look at it, what is the difference between all of these things and rape? What are all of the things when women sleep to get paid? they sleep with other people to get paid. Why is this? The only difference in the West is that it's consent. That one person gave consent and the other person didn't give consent. For them, other than that, these things are not in any way problematic within their society. Subhanallah. And this is the inconsistency that they have in determining how to treat women. And the other statistic is 1 out of 10 children in America do not get the full meal that they need for their basic nutrition. This is 1 in 10 children in America. Subhanallah. In a country which is so rich, has taken so much money, yet where has all the money gone? You see, the problem wasn't the amount of money that they steal through their foreign policy. It's about how they earned it and how they spend their wealth and how they distribute their wealth, which they need to solve at the core, which is that the system doesn't work and that the Islamic system works. Now, in the next video, inshallah, we will now jump forward. We will go past many of the discussions to do with the struggles that the Prophet ﷺ went through, because we want to just discuss certain flashpoints. So we will discuss the boycott period and Amul Huzn, which is the year of sorrow that the Prophet ﷺ went through. But to conclude, there are some matters that I think we should look at. For one, if the Prophet ﷺ was given revelation so that people could just worship, just say we believe in God, then we would need no revelation. If it was just so that people were to believe that riba is wrong, then we would not need revelation. If it was to do with that within the society, we needed people to think that there's a general concept of justice, then we would need no revelation. In fact, this is the inconsistency of human beings trying to develop laws and human beings trying to understand the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the concept of God. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for that reason, was sent with a creed, a belief and a system which organizes life in relation to the belief. And therefore this is what organizes life in a harmonious way, so that people actually live in accordance completely in the beliefs, inwardly and outwardly in their lives, according to the laws of the Creator. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله العظيم.